Sports Interaction has you covered with odds on every playoff game. Before the game starts, live in play, or how your favorite player will perform. Doing it right since 1997, Sports Interaction is Canada's sportsbook. With the most competitive odds, Sports Interaction makes it easy to deposit, play, and cash out. Join now and see all that sports betting has to offer. Head to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN. That's sportsinteraction.com/SDPN. 19 plus. Please play responsibly.
This is Agent Provocateur with Allan Walsh and Adam Wilde. Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada's sportsbook.
So I am not going to say welcome to another episode of Agent Provocateur, because Steve Dangle will take that and keep messing with the Allan Walsh impression. So we're going to start it a totally different way.
Okay.
How's it going, Adam?
It's good, Allan. How are you?
How are the playoffs treating you?
Oh, well, I have to tell you, I really thank you, by the way. Thank you for that. I really appreciated that. I feel like that was a veiled shot, not less at me and more at Steve, which is deserved. But yeah, no, I mean, listen, I was at the game with Jesse Blake on Game 7, and the Leafs lost. And I don't know, the way things are going, I just feel like typical Toronto fan, a little stung again, but I felt like it was a better year. And I know that you look at the playoffs from a completely different perspective. So you're probably looking at me like I must, as a 34-year-old man, you must look at me and be like, he's such a child. So stung by this team.
You're a fan. You're a fan.
I'm a fan. So how are the playoffs going for you? Because it's a different experience for an agent.
So we're going to do a little playoff edition of Agent Provocateur today. Playoffs are a lot of things converging at once. So the players on teams that have been knocked out of the playoffs or didn't make the playoffs, there's a whole process that players go through, from exit medicals with the club. And then many times there's issues of, does the player need surgery on a particular body part from an injury? Who's going to do the surgery? Mm-hmm. Can it wait a year? How severe is it? So there's a lot of discussions with GMs and doctors and players, and sometimes players and parents, where we're all trying to get resolution on the knee injury or the hip or the shoulder. And a lot of times, as you well know, at the end of the season for a particular team, come the announcements that this player got surgery, that player got surgery. There's a lot of work behind the scenes to get to that point. Mm-hmm. You hear the surgery announcement, but not all the work, the second opinions, sometimes third opinions, the debates going back and forth on whether the player actually needs surgery or not. So you have the medical as a key part of the end of season wrap up. And then you have the exit interviews that take place between the player and the GM, player and the head coach, talking about their season, their progression, their development. What can we do differently? Sometimes
it's usually long or short. What would be the average length of something like that? And do you have to prepare for it as a player?
I don't think there's really anything to prepare in and of itself. Some exit meetings have been 5 minutes, mm-hmm. and others have been several hours.
Okay.
And it really depends on the personalities of the people involved. Mm-hmm. Some GMs like to sit down and have a full dissection of the season, and they ask a lot of questions about coaching staff, training staff, medical staff. What can we do differently? How can we be better? Those are very common questions that GMs tend to ask during those meetings. Sometimes a player is at the end of his contract and he's a impending restricted free agent or a impending unrestricted free agent, and the conversation veers more towards the player's future with the club. They won't there won't be a negotiation going on in the meeting, but there will be what I call like a statement of interest, where a GM will say, listen, we really want you back, and I'm going to give Allan a call in the next, week or two, and we'll start talking, and hopefully we get something done and you're back next year. And sometimes a GM will come right out and say, for whatever reason, you're not in our plans. We're not going to be making you an offer, so plan on, going to the free agent market, or we're not going to give you a qualifying offer and you're going to be free to go wherever. And I'm going to call Allan and let him know that as well. Thanks for everything. That's a much shorter meeting.
No kidding.
Yeah. But so there's all that stuff going on what everyone else getting ready for a playoff game or 2 playoff games in any given day, or in the first round, 4 playoff games in any given day. And really my days are starting really early, talking to all the now logistically, players are leaving their home, their club city, and going home. So the club is purchasing air tickets and players are moving out of their, homes or condos or apartments. Sometimes there's furniture rented. Sometimes stuff needs to go into storage. So logistically, that makes it a very busy time. Coupled with that, I always go on the road for playoffs. And this playoff cycle, I was in Minnesota, Florida, 3 games in LA, and New York. So there was a lot of air miles the first round and a half. As we go from Sweet 16 to Sweet 8. Is there
a conflicted parent feeling when you see two of the guys that have been on this show, David Perron and Marc-Andre Fleury, go head to head in like a war? That first round with St. Louis and Minnesota was, I think, for a lot of people, a surprisingly, obviously you're a Blues fan or a Wild fan, you're interested, but outside of it, it made headlines as one of those special series of this first round. How was it watching for you?
You mean when David Perron comes down the ice and scores on Marc-Andre Fleury?
Yeah.
How do I feel?
Yeah.
Yeah. Conflicted. Good word. Okay. Yeah. Obviously happy for David, and obviously painful anytime I see a goal go in on Flower. Flower sent me a text after one game. I don't think I'm talking out of school to say it. He said, next time you talk to David, tell him I'm going to let all the air out of his tires.
That's awesome. And what was great, Allan? A reaffirmation that, at least from what I've read and what I've seen, that Marc-Andre Fleury is going to be back next year, which is great.
Yep.
So that's very cool. And, obviously, at his point in his career, it's a season by season ish thing. So it's cool that he had such a fun run and that he wanted to come back. Did he say anything about Minnesota or anything that you thought, man, what a special, I'm glad he ended up there?
Well, I know that he really enjoyed the experience there. The organization was amazing to him. Billy Guerin's a great friend of his. From their playing days, they won a cup together as players, won a couple of cups together with Bill and management. The fans were amazing to him. We'll have to see how the offseason goes and what the future holds.
There you go. I like that. Very agent of you. And I guess I wanted to bring it back to the end of season meetings, because I don't think, most of us, when we meet with our bosses, it's not the end of anything. We're just continually meeting with our bosses. Do you ever have to deal with clients that are surprised by what the general manager said in the meeting? Is it you, or is it normally it's kind of what's expected?
Most of the time, there isn't any real new revelations that take place in an exit meeting. Mm-hmm. But periodically something is said, either from the player that tweaks the GM, or the GM says something that causes the player to be surprised. And I know that in any given year, there's at least one or two phone calls I get from a GM or a player, either not happy with the way the exit meeting went, or not happy with something that was said in the meeting that needs some pretty quick follow-up to make sure messages didn't get crossed and there's no lingering issues beyond what was said that day.
And then you have to get in and step in on that. The other thing is, with players going deeper and deeper into the playoffs, Allan, you've seen this year after year. I think did you say it was 25 straight years at Octagon that there's been a Stanley Cup awarded to a client? Right. So we're going for year 26. What is when you call a client in the third round, and it's game 4, the third round, and it's going to be a long series, how different are they? How different is their voice? Or when you see them, do you notice any physical changes? Do you notice energy changes? Or are they kind of usually just the same as they are in the regular season?
I try to leave players alone during the playoffs. There are certain times where we communicate with each other. Right after games is a time where I always connect with a player during the playoffs. Sometimes the day before a game, we'll, have a brief conversation, but I let everybody know I'm here if you need anything, but I'm not going to bother you. Okay. Right. You've got other things to do, other things going on. I remember one year it was St. Louis versus Boston. It was the year St. Louis won the Cup. And I went into Boston for Game 7, and it was the day before Game 7. And and David Perron knew I was coming in, and his parents were there, and his wife was there, and I text David, "Hey, I'm going to be in, and if you have time, happy to meet for coffee. If you are busy or don't want to get together, no worries at all. I'm here for the game. I'm here to support you, and we'll see each other after the game on the ice." And Dave was like, no, let's get together for coffee. So we agreed to meet at the Starbucks a couple of blocks from the hotel. And Dave and I are sitting there having coffee, talking about the playoffs, talking about the last series, talking a little bit about Game 7 and what it means. And we reminisce together a little bit about some of the things that have happened in his past, some of the adversity he's overcome that is very well documented. And Doug Armstrong is across the street, walking totally by himself, very slow. And I go, "Hey, look, there's Army." and he looked like he needed a friend, right? He was a man. So I walked outside onto the curb because the glass is a little smoky. And I took a picture of Army by himself walking across the street, and I blew it up a little bit, and I texted to him while David and I are sitting there. And I wrote under the picture of him, "A man alone in his thoughts, ... before Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals." And I sent it, and Dave and I are laughing. And Doug Armstrong, we saw him like pull out his phone, so it must have vibrated, read it, and start looking around like. And we never came out of the Starbucks. I never told them where I was.
Oh, no, that's mean.
He looked around a little bit, and then he put his phone back in his pocket, and he kept on walking.
Yeah, that's.
I still have the photo.
I'm sure that'll never see the light of day, but that's very funny, and I know we want to see it. Oh, Al, that's funny. So there was a couple of things we were talking about pre-show today. You brought a couple stories to the show, and one of the things that I love about this, and we've gone to dinner. The stories that you have, Allan, are special. They're just a whole glimpse into a different world that us as fans. We talked about me being a fan beforehand. It's just a different world. So There's a couple of crazy stories that you've never heard before that Allan's going to tell you. And the first one has to do with a very famous sandwich, right, Al?
It really does. So you well know, and most people know, that I was born and raised in Montreal. And what Montreal is known for, amongst many things, is the character and the history and the tradition of its restaurants, right? Some of their restaurants are literally world famous / legendary. So let's go back in time, far, far, far back in time, all the way back to the 2010 playoffs, Pittsburgh Penguins against the Montreal Canadiens. It was the conference semifinals. This was what was known in Montreal as the spring, Halak Spring, right? This was the Halak Spring. And I was in Montreal I got there before game 3 of that series. That series ended up going 7 games. Montreal won the series. And it was before game 3. I was at game 3. After game 3, I went down and I went over to the Penguin side. And on that team that year, I was working with Flower, Pascal Dupuis, Ruslan Fedotenko, and Mike Rupp. All right. So I had 4 guys on the team. And Flower is always, every time I've ever seen him after a game, the absolute last person out of the room. Okay. So, I've seen everybody, and then Flower comes out last, as I'm well expecting. And hey, we going to get together for lunch tomorrow. What's the plan? If you can't make it, you're busy, no worries. You have some team function, no worries. He's like, no. Let's plan on lunch. Maybe we'll get Duper and Rupper and Feds, and we'll all go to lunch somewhere. Great. I'll get a text what time practice is, and we'll figure it out from there. So I'm kind of on standby in the afternoon. Flower texts me, hey, you good for 2:00? Yep, 2's fine. And then he calls me and he says, hey, Allan, you ever hear of a restaurant in Montreal called Schwartz's? I said, Schwartz's. He goes, yeah, Schwartz's. I said, Flower, I grew up in Schwartz's. My dad grew up on the street behind Schwartz's. I said, Schwartz's has been around since my dad was a kid. I said, everybody in Montreal knows Schwartz's. He says, well, what kind of food is it? I said, buddy, the best smoked meat in the world. But you can go, off of the beaten path. They have amazing rib steaks with these incredible spices too. I mean, you can have just about anything there. So he's like, they were talking about it in the room and I've never been. Maybe, we can go to Schwartz's. No problem at all. So I have a mid-sized SUV that I rented at the airport, drive to the Bell Center, a couple blocks from my hotel. And there's an area through the garage where the players come out after practice. I'm kind of sitting there waiting 5-10 minutes. Flower comes out and he's by himself and he goes, you mind if a couple of the other guys come too? Okay. He said, they heard Schwartz's and everybody kind of wants to go. I was like, well, how many guys? Oh, I don't know. It was like total of 8 guys, 7 guys, 8 guys. So out of the garage at that moment comes Rupper, Duper, Feds, Sidney Crosby, Kunitz, and Letang. And, it's a mid-sized SUV. And Flower goes, pop the trunk. I pop the trunk and 2 guys, there's no conversation between them. 2 guys just automatically jump into the trunk of the SUV, the area between the back row and the door that comes swinging down. Door closes. I mean, they're scrunched up in there. The rest of the guys come in. The SUV drops about 2 feet, right?
I bet it did. Yeah.
We're literally riding on the ground, and off I go to Boulevard Saint Laurent and Schwartz's. Park the SUV. We get out. Now, the thing you got to know about Schwartz's, right? I told you this place is legendary. It's not very big inside. And walking in, it's like walking into the 1930s or 40s. Mm-hmm. Everything is original, right? The countertops, the stools at the counter, the tables. I mean, everything looks literally like it's still the 1940s. And there was a line of about 30, 40 people all the time waiting to get in. There's no reservations, right? Mm-hmm. You just wait in line. And by the looks of the line, when we pulled up, it's a good hour.
Wow.
So we get out and everybody kind of looks at me, right? Because nobody wants to stand on the sidewalk for an hour in the midst of a playoff round. So I go in and I happen to recognize one person working there from the time when I used to go as a kid. So I walk over. Oh, Allan, how are you? Good. Come here. I got a situation. Yeah. Listen, I've got 8 guys on the Pittsburgh Penguins outside who've never had Schwartz's smoke meat. And everybody wants to come in and have a quick lunch. Can you accommodate them? Oh, yeah, no problem. Next table becomes available. You guys come in. Just wait outside on the side, on the corner, and, I'll come get you. I come out. Guys are still looking at me. I said, relax, guys. 5-10 minutes. 5 minutes go by. The guy from inside the restaurant comes out. Now, Schwartz's is lively, loud. It's bustling. It's hard to hear yourself, let alone the person you're with, when you're having a lunch or dinner at Schwartz's. We walk in, this place is loud. People are talking, you hear dishes clanking. I mean, it's a bustling, lively restaurant. We walk in, everyone looks up, and dead silence. Dead silence. Okay. So we kind of look around, and it is eerie because I've never heard Schwartz's that quiet, right? So we come in, there's a long table. We all sit down. There's Sidney Crosby, Marc-Andre Fleury, everybody, Chris Letang, all laid out. And guys are ordering old-fashioned smoked meats, and some guys are ordering rib steaks, and we're having fries. And I mean, there's food coming from everywhere, and it's still eerily quiet, right? Nobody is coming up and asking for autographs or pictures or anything, but you can hear a pin drop in Schwartz's while we're eating. And it went pretty quick, 30 minutes, and we're ready to go. And then the person working there, who was nice enough to get us our table, comes up to me and says, hey, Allan, do you think it's possible that we could take a picture of the whole group and all the employees under the awning, under the Schwartz's sign? Okay, there's a big awning out on the front of the restaurant, and he wanted a picture underneath it. So I'm sure. Hey, guys, photo time. Yeah, sure. We all are, walking outside. They go and they get all the employees from inside the restaurant, and we all kind of squeeze in. I'm like in the middle. I got my arm around everybody. I'm all ready to smile. And the guy goes, hey, Allan, do you mind taking the picture? I'm like, yeah, sure. I go out I'm literally standing, 2-3 feet on the road off the sidewalk because I couldn't get the awning and all the guys, this whole crowd in. So I'm literally on the road, taking these pictures. They're out there somewhere. Somewhere is the Pittsburgh 8 guys on the Penguins under the Schwartz's sign, between game 3 and game 4 of of the conference semifinals, and we all, I driving back to the hotel. We all go back to the hotel, and then game 4 morning, I get a text from one of the guys. Hey, if you got a second, give me a call. Sure, give him a call. He goes, hey man, I'm not feeling very well.
Oh no.
I think I got food poisoning. I'm like, food poisoning? He goes, yeah, I haven't felt well since that smoked meat sandwich, to be honest with you. Like, I don't know. I don't know what's going on. Like, I hope I can play tonight. About 15, 20 minutes later, another player texts me. Hey, Allan, can you give me a call? Give him a call. Yeah. I'm not well today, man. Like, I don't know. I'm not feeling good. And there were like 3 guys on the team.
No.
I'm not blaming anything. It could have been what they had for dinner.
It could have,
right? It could have very well been what they had for dinner.
Wow.
But I wasn't feeling great after getting those phone calls.
You realize how this is going to play in the Montreal media now, right? Like, Allan Walsh single-handedly won us the series. It happened.
And I just want to say that I've been a lifetime admirer of Schwartz's. I've been there too many times. Like I said, I grew up there. I grew up inside Schwartz's with my dad and my brothers. There were times we would go 3 times a week, 4 times a week. I mean, it was literally the place where we always went while we were growing up. So, and the guys there have always been great to us, to me, my family. And I still, when I come to Montreal, it's one of the first places that I go to. So I just thought that bringing in that last little part, brought the story full circle.
It did. And, it's funny. We're going to do, and we still haven't announced it fully yet, but we've sort of talked about it on some of the shows that we're going to do something in Montreal for the draft. Canadians getting the first overall pick. That's pretty special. Allan, you've got some clients, some up and comers in that draft. I think one of them may be pegged to go top 5, which is pretty cool.
Yep.
So
David Jiricek is a Czech defenseman. He's playing now for Czech Republic in the World Championships. And on most of the reputable draft lists, he's inside the top 5,
which is awesome. And so, hopefully, I know you're not going to have a whole lot of time, but hopefully we can meet up at Schwartz's, because I'm hungry just thinking about that sandwich. I want to go. So we're going to do a big tour of Montreal, SDPN night coming. And of course, hopefully David's got to be kind of excited now. We're like a month out from this, so it's pretty cool.
Big time. And if you want to do SDPN night at Schwartz's, let me know.
Okay. If we could, oh my God, absolutely. Allan, the other thing is, you got a story. I don't think most people will remember this player. And this is one of the most unbelievable stories I've heard about hockey. And I'm actually surprised you're allowed to tell it.
Well, I think enough years have gone by where, I can throw some names out there and put names and faces into the context of the story. So we went back in time to 2010. Let's get back in our time machine, and let's go all the way back to 2001. And it was NHL playoff time. And at the same time, just as what's going on right now, World Championships are going on in Europe. And in between my playoff tour, I had 6 or 7 players playing on the Slovak team at the World Championships back then in 2001, and a group of guys playing on the Czech team. And the World Championships, one of the cities that was hosting the tournament was Nuremberg, Germany. So I am flying. I was actually in Toronto. And I flew from Toronto to it may have been Mannheim, and drove from there into Nuremberg. And I'm at the Slovak team's hotel. One of the players on the Slovak team was Zdeno Cíger. And I don't know if many people out there right now remember Zdeno Cíger, but Zdeno Cíger in 1995-96 with the Edmonton Oilers scored 31 goals. He had 31 goals and 70 points. He was a hell of a hockey player. And Zdeno, wasn't the first time he scored 31 goals. I think the year before he had 27. I mean, he was a really, really good player, goal scorer, and one of the top players on the Oilers, Glenn Sather's Edmonton Oilers. And after the 96 season, Zdeno disappeared. His contract was up. He was married to a woman, I believe she was a nurse, and she couldn't work as a nurse in Canada, didn't like living in North America, and she wanted to go back to Slovakia in the worst way and live there. And Zdeno decided that he was going to leave the NHL after scoring 31 goals, 27 years of age, and go back and play in Slovakia.
Wow.
And 4 years later, Zdeno was still playing in Slovakia. Now, I got into the business in 1995, right? So 95-96, Zdeno scores 31 goals. The question that came up every year in the offseason, whatever happens to Zdeno Cíger, and why doesn't somebody sign him and bring him back to play in the NHL? Mm-hmm. And every year there'd be an interview with Zdeno, and he'd say, "No, I'm not coming back. I'm not interested. I'm really happy in Slovakia. Everything is great." So Zdeno is on the Slovak team that year in 2001. And it's May 2001, Nuremberg, Germany. I'm there. And a bunch of NHL GMs are there. And some NHL owners are there. And Doug Risebrough was the GM of the Minnesota Wild. And he and I and the owner of the Wild at the time, Bob Nagley, who's since deceased, decide to meet together in some pub for lunch. So we are sitting in this outdoor area on these big tables with beers and our lunch. And Doug says to me, "Hey, Allan, you got how many guys on the Slovak team?" I said, "I don't know, about 7. Yeah. Zdeno Cíger, do you have any insight what he's going to do?" I said, "Not at all." I said, "Doug, that's the annual question everybody always asks, what is going on with Zdeno Cíger?" He goes, "Well," he says, "I know you don't represent him or anything, but do you mind talking to some of your guys and seeing if you can set up a meeting for me and Zdeno?" I said, "Sure, simple enough." Go back to the hotel, Slovak Player Hotel after lunch, meet up with a couple of my guys. "Hey, can you ask Zdeno if he is available to meet with Doug Risebrough, the GM of the Minnesota Wild, who would like to talk to him about next year?" So while I was asking two players that, Zdeno Cíger is walking into the lobby. So they go, "Zdeno, come here. This is our agent, Allan Walsh. Allan, here's Zdeno. Zdeno, Allan's got a question for you." He's like, "Yeah, shoot." I was like, "Doug Risebrough, GM of the Minnesota Wild, would like to meet you to talk about next year. Are you interested to meet him?" He goes, "You know what's going on in my life?" I said, "No, I have no idea." He goes, "Oh, I'm getting divorced, and I've actually been thinking a lot about NHL, and would really like to go back." I said, Are you looking for an agent? I'd love to represent you." He goes, "Oh yeah, thank you. I'll think about it. We'll talk. I said, "Okay." So I said, "Do you want to meet Doug Risebrough tomorrow?" He goes, Sure. So we set up a time in the lobby. They're going to go meet for coffee. I go back and tell Doug. Doug's excited. Everything's great. They're going to get together. day or two later, I'm at the Slovak game. The warm-up is going on, pregame warm-up, and I see Doug and Bob Nagley there. And I walk over and I say hi. And I said, hey, Doug, how was your coffee with Zdeno Cíger? He says, it was very enlightening. I'm like, enlightening? I said, okay. He goes, let me tell you how it went. I said, Zdeno, would you have any interest in playing next year for the Minnesota Wild? And he said that he would. And I said, that's great. Can I ask you why? He goes, yes. He said, I don't want to play anywhere where there's any stress to make the playoffs. And you guys are like the worst team in the league, right? You finished like near the bottom of the league. That's perfect for me because I don't want to be anywhere where we're expected to make the playoffs, where there's any stress. I don't like stress in my life. I like to be calm and relaxed. So there's that. He says, also, you guys have a lot of lakes, right? In Minnesota? He said, yeah, we're the land of 10,000 lakes. Yeah. He goes, I love fishing. I love fishing. So Minnesota would be perfect for me. You know, I can, go to practice, maybe after practice, go and fish, like at least a couple of times a week. So Doug's like, okay. He says, what kind of contract are you looking for? And Zdeno told Doug, oh, it's got to be as long as possible. I need a long-term contract. And Doug said, well, you're already in your early 30s. Why do you need a long-term contract? And Zdeno said, well, I have a really bad back. And I don't know how long I'm going to be able to play. Right? So I need, I may only be able to make it through half a season. So I need as long a term of contract as possible. And Doug's like, okay. And he's anything else? And as Dan's like, oh, I'm really excited, thinking more and more about Minnesota, but I don't like crowds. I don't like a lot of people. I like, calm. I like things to be spread out. I think Minnesota would be perfect for me. Okay. So Doug looked at me and said, I'll be passing on Zdeno Cíger.
I can't see why.
I was shocked myself, right? So I went and saw Zdeno after the game, and I just said to him, Zdeno, I know I'm not your agent, but I'm going to give you some unsolicited advice here. Yeah, when you're talking to a GM about where you might want to play or playing for his city, now I wouldn't bring up a bad back and long-term contract in the same sentence. Mm-hmm. And I probably wouldn't talk about, not wanting to make the playoffs and not wanting any stress. Every GM wants to make the playoffs. It's not really a good thing to say, just helping you out here any chance I can. And he's like, oh yeah, I probably shouldn't have said that. Okay, well, thanks for that. I see, I wouldn't say anything about the fishing either, whatever your hobbies are, I keep them to yourself. So I got a call from Zdeno about 4 or 5 days after the World Championships. Hey, Allan, I just want to let you know, I got my deal done with a team, and I got a really good agent I'm really happy with, recommended to me by a friend, and everything's good. So thanks for everything. And, don't call me, I'll call you. All right. And then a couple of days later, I see Zdeno Cíger signed a multi-year contract with the New York Rangers. General manager, Glenn Sather. So, I understood the connection to Slats, mm-hmm. but I start thinking, New York City, a lot of people, busy. And they had one of the biggest payrolls in the NHL.
Oh, yeah.
All right. In 2000, 2001, 2002. and they were looking to make the playoffs. They weren't there to just skate through the season and not have any postseason action in New York. So I made a mental note to see how things go with Zdeno. And I had a player on the Rangers that year, and they all flew in on September 8th, September 9th, 2001. And the Rangers hotel for a lot of the players was the Marriott next to the World Trade Center.
Oh my goodness.
And 2 days after arriving in New York City was 9/11.
Oh,
The biggest terrorist attack in the history of the United States, maybe the world. And this is 48 hours after he arrives in New York. So going into the season, I remember Zdeno got moved to Tampa at some point during the year. And that was his only year on the multi-year deal. He went back to Slovakia. Whether he got bought out, I think he got bought out, or there was some kind of a settlement on his contract in some way at that time. And he went back to Slovakia. But, I was still, in 2001, I was, 6 years in the business. So I still considered myself fairly green. Mm-hmm. And that was, at the time, that whole back and forth with Risebrough and being over at the World Championships at that time was something I said to myself back then, if I ever write a book, there's going to be a chapter about this situation in the book. Well, now there's an episode on the podcast. So
that's right.
Maybe we'll leave it out of the book.
No, that's got to make the book anyway. Allan, wow, what a story. And, I started watching the NHL when I was probably 8 or 9. So that was right around the time he would have left. So I had never heard of him. Just what a crazy story. And I know you said he's coaching in Slovakia now, so he's still involved in the game and still loves the game, which is cool.
Oh, yeah.
That's awesome. Well, go ahead.
And he ended up having a fantastic career in Europe.
Yes.
Where he's one of the most celebrated players to ever don a Slovak national team jersey and play in Slovakia. And again, 30-plus goal scorer in the NHL. Great player, very nice person, but that was a heck of a situation.
Yeah. Just looked at his hockey DB before this. He had 230 points in his very limited career. That's a pretty potent career. So good for him. And Allan, what an unbelievable story. Couple of stories. So I don't know what to say other than thank you, because I really enjoyed. I think what it is, and I think what makes this special and talking to you special is the fact that we get to see that from an angle that no one else does, right? And what's interesting to me about that story, other than Zdeno, is that you are not his agent, and yet you're still brokering conversations. And I think it's so interesting about our perception of agents is usually that they're banging their fist on the desk, give my client more money or that sort of thing. But really, there's a lot of teamwork between you and general managers, as well as between you and players.
Like I've always said, and that's very insightful, Adam, 95% of the time, not only are the player, the agent, and the club's interests completely aligned, but there's actually great cooperation going on between all the parties involved. Everybody's working in the same direction. Everybody's helping the other person out, other than the actual putting together of the contract, which is, I wouldn't say adversarial, because the idea of somebody or anybody pounding on the table, smoking cigars and banging down the phone, just is not reality. Mm-hmm. But there's give and take. There are times when conversations could get a little emotional or heated, but it's all part of the process. There's 5% of the time where your interests don't align. And when they don't align, you have to fashion a set of values going into the discussions and lay out what your lines are in the sand, if there are any. And if those lines get crossed, that's usually the times in historically where people have heard from me.
There you go. Well, Allan, it's a fascinating look. Thank you so much for sharing those stories and naming names. That was really fascinating.
All right. Well, we'll see you for Playoff Edition Part 2 coming up next week.
This has been Agent Provocateur with Allan Walsh and Adam Wilde. Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada's sportsbook. Follow Allan Walsh on Twitter @WalshA. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts by searching Agent Provocateur and hitting the subscribe button. YouTube.com/SDPN.